Hi, I'm Tom Monahan from General Finishes here today. We're going to talk about our gel stains and show you a couple different things that we can do with them. We're going to be working on an existing oak cabinet door. And first we'd like to just make sure that we wait a minute so everybody can join in to the conversation today. And if you have any questions, make sure you post them into the comment section. And we'd like to share the video. If you have friends, share it with them. And if you have any questions at all, just make sure you get them in and we'll get them answered today. So we want to go over some of the basics of what people are talking about. And with the whole stay-at-home order, a lot of people have time on their hands to work on projects, and what we're getting is bombarded with phone calls about doing their kitchen cabinets or their staircases. A lot of people are doing their stair treads and their hand railings. So it's a perfect time just to kind of review what we want to talk about and go over some of the processes and the steps of this. Pretty simple for anybody to be able to do it. We really want to talk about the first step is take an existing finish. This is just a builder grade oak cabinet door. You know, there's millions of homes out there with the golden oak kitchen cabinets. And what's nice about it, the gel stains, is we can clean this surface and do a light sanding on it and be able to apply the gel over top of this existing finish without having to sand all this off. And that's what we're going to do today. The first thing we talk about cleaning which is just absolutely critical, is to make sure that we get all the oils and the grease and contaminations off this door so the stain has something to bond to. And we're going to do a light scuff sanding. I've got a couple different versions of Scotch-Brite pads. You know, there's basically synthetic steel wool. And the different colors don't notate the different grits. So typically the darker the color, the darker the color, the coarser the grit is. So we're going to work with the gray or the maroon pads today. The green pad is extremely rough, and what I want to prevent is trying to put any deep scratches into this door. So I'm going to take and start off with a cleaning process. We've got a couple of different products here, and we like using the denatured alcohol and the water in a 50-50 blend. And the reason for that is the straight denatured alcohol is a strong enough solvent. We really don't want to dissolve the finish that's on here. So we just want to degrease it and clean it. So we use the denatured alcohol 50-50 blend in water. And this is mild enough to be able to remove any grease or oil, but it's also going to give you just enough solvency to remove any dirt or grime that's on this cabinet door. And you just give it a good scrub. This door is fairly clean, but if anybody has kids, or everybody knows there's always a certain area in your kitchen that gets dirtier than others. Normally it's wherever the peanut butter and the butter are kept in the kitchen. So I'm just giving it a good clean. What we like about the denatured alcohol water blend is that it evaporates quickly, so we don't have to wait for this to dry. So we're going to pull this off, and you can kind of see what we're picking up here. You know, it's still picking up dirt off of this door, even though this door is in fairly good condition. And there's no sense in removing all this finish if it's intact. All we're going to do is change the color of it. Now, we've cleaned the door. That's the first step. And it's really important to make sure that you go through and thoroughly clean the surfaces down that's going to be stained. What we want to try and do is prevent any areas of contamination. And that's normally right here where the handle is, because this is where this door gets handled all the time. So normally this area is either worn through or discolored, or it just gets really sticky with residue from food and contact. So concentrate on that area. And then once I'm done, we want to go to just a light, thorough sanding. And there's a couple of options that you have available. You know, using just a traditional sandpaper that you can use to cut and sand just enough to break the finish film. We like using the flexible sanding pads. Our friends at Klingspor, they have the 220 flexible sanding pads that work really well. And the reason I like these, they're flexible enough that you can see that they will conform and fit down into the channel on the chamfer of this door, and it allows us to be able to just do a nice even scuff, and that's all we want. We just want to break that surface film enough And you can cut these in half with a scissors, and you can make them smaller if you want. These actually fit on a quarter sheet palm sander. You could get into if you want a power sand, but you got to be careful. What we really want to keep in mind is the sanding has a lot to do with the grit that we're using. And if I was to use something coarse like this 100 grit, this would actually take all the finish right off the door. And what you might end up doing is end up with blotchiness because you remove the finish from one area and not necessarily from the other part of the door. So too coarse is no good. Too fine is no good because we don't want to go so fine that we're going to make this door super slick. We just want to give it enough of a sand and a light abrasion. And this is normally I can do this by hand. I'm just trying to break the surface film so it gives me some contact for the stain, so it's got something to grab a hold of. Now that denatured alcohol is already dried off of here. That's another reason that we like to work with the denatured alcohol. You know, like here's a few scratches. You know, you can sand those down and try and eliminate some of the scratches, but what I don't want to do is burn through my finish. There. Just get the edges. And because this is flexible, you can see you can conform right down into the routed edges there. The doors, it's a pretty typical raised panel cathedral door, very common. And a couple of other things. I'm working off of, if you've noticed, I got a couple of bench cookies here from Rockler. This way it keeps it up off the surface. You can also get into like these painters pyramids. These work really well too. That way you've got everything propped up and you're working a little bit elevated. Just makes it easier. Now, I've got the door prep sanded, and I want to wipe this off, so I'm going to come back with a clean, oil-free tack cloth. I'm just going to pull all of that dust off there. Now, you could blow it off, but I found that just by blowing it off with a hose or vacuuming it, you still need to come back with a tack cloth to pull out the residue that's in the grain here. And you can see how much I pulled off that door. But now my door is pretty well prepped and ready for stain. Now, we're going to be using the oil-based gel stains today. And I've got some mineral spirits on hand. I like to have, anytime I'm working with oil-based, I'm going to have a mineral spirits on hand. And I have a cotton terry cloth. This is just a shop towel. And what I like to do, just a little bit mineral spirits on a rag. This is going to give me a couple of different, I'm going to use it for just not only to wipe the door down. This will also help me spread my stain. This is kind of a slip coat. You know, it's just a light coat. Not saturated, but the stain is going to glide on nice and easy, and it's going to help me be able to wipe it off and give me control. I also use this so that when I'm using my brush, and as I'm dipping my brush into the stain, I can pull off the excess, and we'll show you as we walk through that there. Okay.
Tom, we got a quick question from Brian. He asks, would gel stain be the best way to consistently match woods of the same species but different ages, since woods of different ages absorb penetrating stain differently?
Well, the one real good quality of a gel stain is they're topical. So that means they don't soak in. They don't penetrate deep into the wood. So if you're working on, especially older woods by nature have already somewhat self-sealed if they had an existing finish. On brand new woods like pine or poplar or alder, the gels stay up on the surface and give you a much more uniform color over multiple species of woods. So it's a great product overall if you're working on multiple species of woods to be able to get a nice uniform consistent color with it. That's one of the benefits of a gel stain that I really like working with. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So here's the thing about a gel. It's a gel. It's thick. It's got nice creamy consistency, almost kind of like a shoe polish consistency. But what this does is it allows us to be able to control where we put the product. It's not going to run all over the edges and run down your arm. So applying the gels, there's a couple of different methods here. And you can just take a regular cloth. If you're going to do it with a cloth, I'll take a paper towel here. This would be if you're wanting to just put on a really light coat of color. And you can see, just by applying a thin coat, you can change the color of this door. If you want to really go radical change of color, then we can put it on heavier and take off more product. But you can see here, this is how the gels were originally, and this is what they're intended for, is a nice clean look, nice transparent color. But one of the popular trends right now, and it has been going on actually for quite some time though, is to do a transformation of color, to go from a golden oak door to a radically darker finish. And the gels, because they're topical and they do contain polyurethane, they will dry and you can build multiple coats of color. Another advantage of them. But in this door, I'm going to just go ahead and stain the door. And remember, I put a little bit of a slip coat underneath there just to get my stain spread evenly. I'm just using a foam brush. As far as I'm concerned, I think the goal, just get color on the door. Get it on the door, and then we'll come back and we'll wipe it all off. Okay? Gels have been around a long time. It's just the popularity of them is kind of showed up in the last 5-10 years of people doing over existing finishes, going over existing finishes like this. And it's really started quite a trend. Now there's a couple of ways that we can approach this. I can just take a clean cloth and again, wipe them off. If you want just a soft color change. And once you wipe them off, it's going to be dry overnight. It's an oil-based product, so we want it to dry overnight. But that right there just shows you how you can change the color of an existing kitchen without having to do a lot of excessive work. Now that's just one coat application. If I wanted to, I could come back in, and if I wanted to build a darker color, I'm just going to take a bristle brush and I'm just going to come in and dry brush color on here then.
Stacy asks, can you talk a little more about how you prepared the door by sanding? What would happen if you sanded down to the bare wood? Well,
if you sanded down to the bare wood, you're going to get a much different look on the color. So you got to think about, we have finish sitting underneath here right now, so all we're doing is applying color over top of the door. And what this does is allows us to be able to gradually change the color by doing 1 coat, 2 coats, 3 coats. I'm just going to take a little bit of mineral spirits here on my rag.
Angie asks, is a sponge brush the best way to apply this stain?
It's just personal preference. I've seen a number of people who like to get their rags out and just dip in the rags and apply it with a rag. The spun brush is just convenient. There's nothing that says that it's the best way of doing it. Now I'm going to take this with the mineral spirits on it and kind of dab off my excess. So the reason I'm doing this is it allows me to pull the color out evenly.
Angie has another question. I have the semi-gloss top coat I was going to apply. Oh, I'm sorry, one more before that. I recently ordered the water-based wood stain. Would that work as well?
Yes, you can do the same process with a water-based wood stain. I'm going to say that the big difference between the two of them, the water-based stains dry quicker. There's just no doubt about it that they're much faster in drying, but the gel stains are very forgiving, and I think if this is sometimes your first project, you know, starting off with a little bit slower, working with a gel will allow you to be able to even it out and give you a nice uniform consistent. The water-based will do the same process. It's just putting color over a sealed surface. But what we really want to do is get the prep process. That's critical. The cleaning, the sanding, you know, the prepping of the door to accept color is actually more critical than whether you use oil or water. I'm just going to go ahead and finish this out.
Aaron asks, what if I have water spots on a few of my cabinets?
Yes, and then that means you've got a real kitchen that's lived in. The whole thing about water spots are they're going to happen eventually over time, and you can take a little soft, you know, the Scotch-Brite pad or a little soft sandpaper and lightly sand them out, and sometimes you can remove them with a little bit of a cleaner like an orange oil. But water spots are typically found in areas, especially right underneath the kitchen sink, or anywhere that water is going to drip and remain. If you wipe your cabinets down and keep them clean and dry, typically water spots they'll go away over time, you know, over time as the water dries out. But water spots are pretty normal, and it's a matter of you can use a cleaner or like orange oil and a soft cloth and just lightly wipe them down, and a lot of times you can actually remove the water spots. Okay?
All right. I have a couple more.
Go ahead.
Okay. Courtney asks, would the process be the same if you were applying over a painted surface, i.e. creating a faux wood finish?
Well, yes, and you could use the gel stains as a glaze over a painted surface to create the faux grain effect. And it is pretty much the same process, because what you're doing is laying color over top of color over an existing finish. Mm-hmm. So that this process right here, whether this door was painted or stained, it's the same process.
Bill wants to know, is extender a good idea for larger surfaces while using water-based?
Yes. Extender is the equivalent to mineral spirits to the gel. So the extender, what that does is it gives you a wet edge. It keeps the product open longer so you have more workability with it. And anytime I'm working on a large surface, I'm going to use extender. Just as if I'm working on oil-based products, I'm going to use the mineral spirits. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I'm just using a cheap brush, just a chip brush. These are, 69 cents or $1. The difference between a brush like that and a brush like the synthetic Worcester brush here, this is a much finer brush, so you're getting less drag lines. These are more designed for pulling kind of color out of the corners. It's not necessarily a finish quality brush, but I think it's important to have them on hand. I have a tendency to work with foam brushes a lot just because they're inexpensive, but they do a good job of absorbing product and pulling it out of color here, putting it out of the corners and stuff here.
Stacy wants to know, when staining with gel using two different colors, for example, gray and black, would you combine both stains in a separate jar and then apply, or would you do one color first, wait, and then follow up with a second color?
That's a good question. You can do it both ways. To me, you get a different result when you blend two colors together, because you're kind of mixing the colors together. But when you layer them, you get separation of color. So personally, I like to put a base color down and a secondary color on top. That's kind of what's on this door right here. This is a Java door it's an alder door, but it's got a dye stain that's underneath it. So the dye stain becomes your base color, and the Java became the secondary color, and it creates different layers of color. So I prefer to, if I'm using multiple colors, I like to lay the first color down and then come over top of it with a secondary color. You can do it both ways. You should try it and see what the results are that you get with it. Okay? So now this door, it's got the first coat on. Now, I would come back with a secondary coat. It's already starting to kind of tack up here. And you have to think about it. It's going over a sealed surface. So there's nothing absorbing into the wood. And it's going to dry on the surface, and then we're going to set this door aside. And I just want to let it dry overnight. I'm in no hurry from this point forward. I want to let this dry completely before I move to my next step. Now, you have to take into consideration if you're doing a full-size kitchen, and if this is your first project, I would much prefer you to start with a smaller project so you understand the process. You know, do a chair or do a small desk, something that has fewer parts to it. Because when you start into a kitchen and you say you have 20 uppers and 20 lowers and say 20 drawer fronts, it becomes quite a project, and you have to be methodical about numbering your doors. So when you take your doors off, identify the door, maybe even where it came from, if it's top or upper or lower, and number them so that you can put them back in place. But then also start on your first door, finish your last door. For your second step, start on your first door, finish your last door. That way you keep a methodical pace of what you've done to it in case it gets by and maybe there's a day or two of an interruption and you come back at it and you kind of forgot where you are. So that way, if you're going to do multiple coats of stain, it allows you to be able to put one coat on the first day, come back within 24 hours under good drying conditions, and always make sure you check our website at generalfinishes.com for product specifications. It'll tell you how long the normal dry times are. Now today it's cool and damp and raining outside. So our drying conditions today are different than they were the other day when it was nice 70 degrees and sunny outside. But because it's oil-based, we're going to let this sit overnight regardless. There's just nothing else I want to do to this, because you have to think about, we just layered color over top of the surface, and what we want to do is allow this to completely dry out. So tomorrow when we come back, and if we decide to put a second coat on, or as like Stacy said, maybe I put a second different color on top of it to create more of a layered effect. I don't want to disturb the stain that's laid down here. I want to be able to get this evened out so that I can put the next coat on, and that way it'll dry. That way I'm not going to have any issues waiting when I have to put my top coats on. Okay, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I mean, these are all good questions because you have a lot of options available.
Okay, we've got a couple more.
Yep.
Nicole wants to know, instead of going darker, can you go lighter from the golden oak with gel stain? For example, more of a weathered white oak look.
Well, yeah, obviously in the color spectrum, and there's 15 colors in this line, plus the clear. You've got the lighter gray colors. Some of the new gray colors. There's a white in the line. Yeah, I was just looking for this other one here. You know, these are a couple of the new colors we come out with, the ash gray, and we did a carbon gray, a darker gray. So going lighter, obviously you have to follow the logic of it's going to be lighter than golden oak. It's going to end up being in these two color ranges here. Now, I will say white over golden oak isn't always the best look, because you're having to deal with a dominant yellow undertone. So sometimes if you're going to do something like that, I would say going lighter is always a challenge. But you could go, lateral decision, you could go to a gray or one of the grays, which will mimic and hold over. And I do have here's a gray door right here.
You want to grab it?
I can, but I don't want it to tip over. There we go. So there's a gray door. So you can go different colors, but you're somewhat limited to the base color you're trying to cover, right? If that makes sense? Mm-hmm. Now let's just say this was a natural door. It had no stain on it. You still have to consider that, even a natural door, this is just the gel satin top coat by itself over a maple door, and you can see that it is ambered over time. So if I was to try and put white over top of this, I think you're going to end up with a yellowish white finish. That's why we make milk paint.
Bill wants to know, when are the new watercolors coming? Love the tobacco and onyx.
Oh, as far as coming, they're out on the marketplace right now. They have been since March of last year. So keep in mind, you can always go to our website and look at the product comparisons to look at the colors. And then you can also search our where to buy location, type in your zip code and find a retailer or dealer within your area. And obviously, these are all available online through like woodcraft.com, rockler.com, Klingspor. Anybody who has a woodworking catalog site, Amazon has become a big channel for people in areas that don't have dealers in their area. But the benefit of having the internet today is you're one click away from being able to find a General Finishes product. We have a lot of great dealers out there, both stocking retailers that you can walk into and take a look at the samples. The water-based stains have kind of gone through, it's kind of funny because we've had them since 1996. So they've been in the marketplace for a long time, and I think people are just starting to discover them for the first time. So they're great products, just like the gels, and this gives you the options. This is one thing I want to say about General Finishes. We have multiple options for color and stain, depending upon the project that you're working on. So if you're working on a redo, like a kitchen like this, or if you're working on brand new construction, or say you're building a home and you want to do your doors and trim and millwork. So we have both oil-based stains, we have the oil-based gel stains, we have water-based wood stains, we have water-based dye stains. So there's plenty of options available for color. Okay?
Becky wants to know, do you recommend a foam roller for a very solid full coverage?
How about that, Becky? Got one right here.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of the roller, especially on larger surfaces. So if I was to stain this tabletop, for instance, you have to think about the method of application is going to change depending upon the project and the size that you're working on. So having all of these available allow you to be able to put down product. It's just it's all relative to the project you're working on. Obviously, I mean, I could roll this flat panel, but I'd still have to get in here with a brush. So I've always got the options of having a roller on hand because it will put out a much heavier coat of color, but then you need to come back and wipe it off or dry brush it out to your desired effect. But definitely the foam rollers have become a big part of finishing, and I think you should try it if nothing else. Okay?
Mary wants to know, what GF stain product would you recommend for a newbie to stain a new pine barn door? The door has no current finish. Color choice would be a cream white.
Well, in a cream white, then I would probably take a look at the water-based. The water-based stains have a good range of color, but on pine especially, they just stain uniform and consistent. And I think on a project like that, I'm just going to say, it's a project that you could easily take on for the first time because it is pine. It's going to stain pretty uniform and consistent. And both the gel stain white and the water-based wood stain white have a nice bright white finish to them with the transparency of wood grain. So either way, I would approach it either way. Personally, I'd use the water-based because it dries fast and I can get my clear coats on and be done with the door in a shorter period of time. Okay?
Mm-hmm. You want to move to the next board?
Yeah. I'm going to put these off then. So we're just going to let this sit aside and we'll let this dry. It's already, I'm going to say this, it's already, you can see I'm not leaving any fingerprints. But I'm going to let this thing set aside and dry because I'll come back with a second coat and put on another color on top of here, actually, now that I got the door up. I'm going to do this. Just take this rag here a second and see. Let's just do this. Go in and see that little bit of mineral spirits on that rag. Just wipe that color out there.
What type of material is the cloth used for removing the excess stain after applying?
Well, I've got 3 different types of cloths here. I've got just a regular terry cloth cotton towel, a shop towel that you can buy. I've got my little bit heavier paper towel, which is your wipe all material. It's like the shop towels in a box that you buy, the blue towels that you buy. These are nice and absorbent. And I mean, you can even use, if need be, if you don't have that, you can just use a good quality roll of paper towel. Okay. I like the cotton rags for the oil. I like the way they work with the oil and how much they absorb. Plus, if I can dampen this down with mineral spirits, it allows me to be able to come back and wipe out the areas and stuff. Okay. How's that sound? Mm-hmm. Let's just do this. I've got another door here. See if I got room here. Okay. Now, let's do a little bit different technique on this one. In fact, I'll show you about putting a heavier coat on here. So again, I'm going to take my denatured alcohol and clean this door. It's a little bit darker door. And you can see it's got some food or whatever it is dried into the corners there. But let's get it cleaned off. And again, I'm going to wipe this down with denatured alcohol. Pull that off the surface there. You can see, it's amazing how much you pick up just in wiping it down. I don't want to put anything on my door that's going to contaminate the surface or take a long time to dry. Now, the mineral spirits I could put on here because it's compatible with the finish. But what I would not want to wash this door with like a soap and water mix, only because it could cause the lacquer to turn color or blush because the water is going to absorb into it. I'm just going to give it a quick, see, it's got a little bit of residue right there. Okay. And I'm going to come back. Just kind of wipe that, and then I'm going to hit it with my shop towel, my tack cloth. Now this is just an oil-free tack cloth. Now, because this is an oil-based finish, you could use a normal tack cloth, but I have a tendency to stay away from them because the sticky residue that's on those tack cloths, the cheap 69-cent ones at the hardware store, is typically linseed oil. It's a sticky substance, and I don't want to put anything sticky on here that's going to cause problems with my product drying. Okay? Let's do this one in brown mahogany. Now, again, I would always recommend that you stir your product, even though it's thick. The beautiful thing about the gel stains are the consistency of color from the top of the can to the bottom of the can, where like in a liquid oil-based stain, if you ever opened up a can of oil stain and there's a inch of sludge in the bottom of the can and everything else is fairly clean, that's all your colorant. And you just need to mix all your products every time so they're stirred properly so all your colors are dispensed evenly. I'm just going to take, I want to show, she talked about rolling. Now this is brown mahogany, it's a little bit different color. And all this is going to do is give me just a quicker, easier way of putting down the color. And then we'll come back and we'll just dry brush it off. Now some people, they want to hide all the grain. They got oak doors, but they don't want to see any wood grain. Well, stain in itself won't cover wood grain. But if you wanted to do something like that, that's going to require a grain filler, which is a lot of work. And if I'm going to tell you, you got oak cabinets to begin with, you're going to have oak cabinets to end with. I would just live with the grain. You know, you're never going to make it look like maple. Just see how quick and easy that color goes down. Now this color is not as dark. I'm just going to give it a light wipe. And the thing about the foam roller is it's pretty versatile. Now, if I'm doing long runs or long, like big refrigerator cabinet doors, anything like that, that's where the foam roller comes in handy. Does that edge look good?
Mm-hmm. Bill wants to know, does GF have more or less pigments than other water-based stain companies?
That Bill's full of questions today, isn't he?
He has a lot of questions.
We use the highest quality pigments and dyes in all of our products. We would much rather have a more expensive raw material for a better quality stain. So I'm going to say that yes, we have very, very high pigment loads in our stains. That's why you can get the colors that you're seeing here. Now look at, see, that's fairly even, okay? Now, we could come back, let's see here, if I got just a little bit of a brush. And I'm just going to pull some of that color off. I've got my rag here, and all I want to do, I don't want to remove it. I just want to kind of even it out and get my colors uniform. These little stubby brushes work well. Okay.
Rosemary asks, is it possible to paint dark cherry cabinets to a white color? If so, what product to use?
Oh, Rosemary. That is can it be done? Yes. Again, the color spectrum of going from dark red to white usually ends up in a pink process somewhere. But we make a product called Stain Blocking Primer just for that reason. And it would require a couple coats of our Stain Blocking Primer to make sure that that color is blocked off completely so it doesn't bleed through. And then you would follow it with the melt paint or the brushable white enamel, which would be suitable. I didn't bring it with me, but I have a board that shows that process actually. See, I didn't really want to remove a lot of that color. And I want to take just a little bit. And that's what people are running into. They're taking, you know, dark mahogany, dark cherry cabinets and want them white. You know, that's your prerogative. It's just you have to understand that you're kind of fighting Mother Nature in the color spectrum there, but from going from dark red to white. It can be done. We have the products. Watch our tutorials. Go to generalfinishes.com and watch our videos on YouTube. You know, we have all that information available, and chances are we've made a video about it. Okay? Does that look? Just a little bit there. See?
Erica asks, let's say someone accidentally got some drops of gel stain somewhere it shouldn't be, wall, floor, etc. Is it possible to get it off? If so, what's the best way? Java specifically. Asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend, yeah.
It wasn't me.
Yeah, we know where you live. You can get it off. If it's just a solid drop, there's a couple little tricks. You can take, and if I have it here, you could take just a flat scraper, right, and just dab it with just a little bit of mineral spirits like a Q-tip and let it sit on there for a few minutes and it should pop off. If you don't want to go that route, the other thing that you can do is there's products like Goop that remove paint off of trim and things like that. Yes, you can remove it. Now, if you spilled a can of it and you've got it all over, then you're better off calling in a professional and having them redo your carpets or redo your floors. But it can be done. You can remove small, you know, everybody's human. We've all got paint drops someplace that they're not meant to be.
Kathy wants to know, which water stain colors do you recommend for changing red cedar beams to a walnut brown color?
Well, at least you're going in the right direction, Kathy. The cedar beams are, if they're aromatic cedar or if they're just white cedar, so, depending on how dark you want to go, then take a look at like our onyx, which is a non-reddish, deep brownish black. And that will, in the combinations of the existing finish, will turn them more towards a walnut tone color. We've got in our water-based wood stain line, you know, we have a lot of dark colors on that range, but in order to hide reds or hide color like that, you need to counteract it with something that doesn't have red in it, because otherwise it's just going to be darker and browner. If you look at our espressos, are one of our more popular colors, but that's also a super dark brown that has a slight red undertone to it. But if I was working with something like that, I'd take a look like our onyx color. Okay?
Good.
There, now see, that's rolled on. I didn't touch it with a cloth, and it's just a matter of just as you dry brush, you pull a little bit of color off to even it out. If that makes sense for the person with the question about the roller. Mm-hmm. Okay? Anybody else?
I think we're caught up on questions now.
That was a good bunch.
Yeah.
That was a good flurry.
Lots of questions.
And you know, the whole point here is the gel stains are easy to work with. They're popular because they give you good depth and good color, and it allows you to be able to change color. I mean, these are actually, this is just a brand new alder door with just the one coat of the wood stain. That's a antique walnut. You can just see the clarity and the depth that it gives you. So the popularity of gels I think they're becoming popular for people not only just to do existing finishes, but if you're doing new wood construction, raw wood, they're uniform and consistent. They're easy to work with. They're popular for a reason. And these colors that we have in our lines are popular trends in the grays. Everybody's moving into the gray patterns. So I think we have probably more grays than most stain companies. We have them in all of our product lines. Just by adding the new colors this year, the ash gray and the carbon and the white, this is where this trend is happening especially in the kitchen cabinet industry. So putting something like this over top of an existing oak door would be it would be very, very trendy, the way that the kitchen markets are going. And I'm going to say that if this is the first time that you're doing something like this and you've already decided to take the dive and tear your kitchen apart, you'll be happy with the end results. And you can go to generalfinishes.com and look at our design center and just look at some of the photos that people have posted of their projects that they've done. And also, it gets to a point to where almost everything that we talk about and we showed today is available at generalfinishes.com. And if you want to, if you like what you've seen today, make sure you share the video, and we also want the feedback, the comments. Some of the questions today were really good questions, and it sounds like a lot of people are tackling projects right now at home. So if there's anything that you didn't see today or we didn't talk about, you can go to generalfinishes.com. We have a great FAQ section about just general finishing questions and all of the product lines, the paints, the stains, the top coats. We appreciate you taking the time today to stop in and say hi and visit us, and what we'd like to do is make sure that we can continue on. We plan on doing these on more of a frequent basis because I think it's a good way of getting information into your hands. And if there's anything you didn't see today, make sure you let us know, and we'll sure to tackle it on a future video. So, all right?
All right, you want to answer one final question?
Yeah, go ahead.
The GF group sees many who paint on the gel stains. Can you touch on that? Specifically, whys of should or should not?
Yes, I can, and I think this is kind of what they're getting into, you know. So let's just start from the beginning. that these stains were originally designed and engineered to put on raw wood as a kind of a one-coat application product. You can build multiple coats. I think you want to kind of be cautious, and I'm speaking as a finisher. If you're going to paint something on so heavy that you lose all your grain and definition, then you might as well transition to one of the paints, because you want to think about if it takes 24 hours or 48 hours for each coat to dry under good conditions, and you want to do 1 coat, 2 coats, 3 coats, and 4 coats maybe. Now what you've done is layered so much stain on top of the surface that you really have painted, effectively created an opaque finish. That's one reason why we did this a couple years ago. This is the Java Gel Stain painted on with 3 coats. And this is our dark chocolate milk paint with 2 coats. So if I was to do a kitchen, and I've got, like I said, 20 doors and drawers and everything involved, and I've got 3 or 4 days of stain time, just allowing stain to dry, I would switch to the water-based milk paint line and put 2 coats on in 1 day and be able to get my kitchen back into use in a much quicker, efficient time schedule. This is personal preference, but if you're going to take a solid oak door or maple door and make it painted on, I think we would much rather have you use another product. People have been doing it, and they've been successful with it, and that's just fine. I think that's a personal preference. But you can see that we have alternatives, and that's how we think. If we're going to do something, we'd like to make it as easy as possible and quick and efficient so that you don't disrupt your household by having your kitchen torn apart for 2 weeks and trying to get back into, a normal way of living. The colors will build, and same with the water-based stains. You can put on more than 1 coat, but I think we've developed our product lines. If they're used, and if you want to watch and see how we use these products in our videos, I think you'll have a better understanding that it's not necessary to go to the extra lengths of putting on 3, 4, 5 coats of stain. Okay? And that's a personal opinion, but it's also one that's going to get you out of some trouble sometimes. If in case the stain, for whatever reason, it doesn't dry and you put another coat on, now you've got yourself a situation where you either have to take it all off and start over again, or just maybe do it the way we'd like to do it. Okay, that's a good question.
Vicki kind of ties into this. Do you use a top coat to finish?
Great question. I'm glad you got to that point. So now that the stain, like I said, we set these doors aside and we're going to let these doors dry until tomorrow. But our choices of top coats, we do make a gel satin, which is actually just a clear finish that goes with the gel top coats. Or you've got the option also of Armor Seal, which is our wipe-on oil and urethane. Both of these products are urethane, so they're hard and durable. But a lot of people have transitioned to the water-based high performance. So now that I've got my colors down, and once this door dries, once we get to a point that this color is dry and I can touch it and handle it and not have any fingerprints or sticky residue, you can go to the water-based top coat. Excuse me. What's nice about the water-based top coats are, A, they dry quick, and they don't have much odor to them. So if you're working in your kitchen, you could put on a coat, say at 9 o'clock in the morning, and come back in mid-afternoon or late afternoon, maybe after dinner and everybody's settled down. You could put another coat on in the evening and have your finish coats done quicker than waiting 24 hours for each coat. Oil-based products, overnight. Water-based products, hours in between. Okay? But it does need a top coat. I'm going to say, if this was just a bookcase or if this was just a shelf, then it doesn't require a heavy-duty finish. But on kitchen cabinets, you want the durable finish to protect from water spots and food and oils and everything else that they're exposed to. Okay? That's a good question. I'm glad you tied that in. Okay.
Right. I think we're good.
All right. Appreciate you stopping by today. And like I said, if you like what you see today, throw us a comment and make sure you share the video if there's information or friends that you'd like to, maybe you got some friends that are interested in doing this, and always visit generalfinishes.com. We also have a great locator on our website of where to buy the products. Punch in your zip code and we can find a dealer in your area. And We appreciate your time today.